Cheryl Adamson, happy International Women's Day.
And to you too, Petra.
Now, you've had a winding road to this position of New Zealand and Parnell. And I note in the notes I've got, it says you were doing marketing in large multinational advertising agencies in South Africa. You ended up with a focus on retail and malls. Then you ended up in Australia, which you corrected, I'm happy to say. No, we've got a lot of love for our Australian cousins. You ended up here in Auckland, and within 2 weeks, you were in charge of the general manager of the Parnell Business Association. Can you give me a bit of an understanding of how you ended up in this role?
Well, I decided to immigrate quite late in life from South Africa, and we'd been traveling to New Zealand. I knew I wanted to come to Auckland, and we'd been traveling here since 2008. And when I came, I kept on touching base with recruiters, and they kept on going, tell me when you're here, tell me when you're here, because it takes a hell of a lot longer than you think it will when you anticipate this. When I eventually immigrated, I had an unscheduled few years in Australia, which is really a kind of personal romance story, so that was awesome. And then came here in 2014. Well, it was really the end of 2013. And when I got here, I touched base with the same recruiter, and she said, I cannot believe it, but the perfect job has just landed on my desk.
And so what was it like for you going into that role, being new to the country, but already connected and loving it? Like, had you conceived of working and living in this sort of area at all?
Not at all. And I knew I wanted to come to Auckland, but where in Auckland, I didn't know. I didn't even know that business associations in the format that they are in Auckland existed. We certainly didn't have that. As you said, my experience was in shopping malls. So that's really what made me perfect for the job, because I was very familiar with that big sort of multi-stakeholder engagement and retailers and commercial businesses. So that's really what made me so suitable for the job, and I was lucky I got it.
So you've been GM of the Parnell Business Association for the past 10 years?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about how Parnell has changed, or how you've seen the suburb evolve over those 10 years?
I think I'm very grateful that I came with let me say it this way, without the baggage of the legacy of Parnell. Clean slate. What I saw was a suburb that I thought was charming. I loved the architecture, I loved the history. I saw all these beautiful stores that were mostly owner run, and I just thought the place was charming. But from the time I got here, people would say to me, oh, but Parnell of the heydays and Parnell in the 90s. And there was always that sense that we should go back. I didn't feel that. I certainly didn't feel that. And when I did start digging, obviously I came to understand how much in Auckland had changed at that time. So sort of leading up to the 2000s, you had the whole development of the viaduct, for the America's Cup. Then around about 2004-05 was the start of Britomart, and we all know how that's developed, and it's a fabulous precinct. Then we, as is wont to do, we do another development, which is the sort of second section of the viaduct, which was for the Rugby World Cup. And then, if you go later on into sort of 2019 to 2020 was the whole redevelopment of Westfield, both sections of Westfield. So what I'm saying is the competitive environment just exploded. And in the middle of that, you had the GFC. So things changed.
And then COVID.
Things changed. Yes, and then we had COVID.
Yeah.
So my view has always been, things change and they'll never be the same. But what I admire about Parnell is just how we've stayed consistent through that. Yes, there's been ups and downs, but I think we punch a lot above our weight.
So I'm hearing you say that the business community in Parnell has a certain tenacity to it.
Yes.
And you arriving and seeing with fresh eyes this suburb, this business space. I hear you saying that we can honour the legacy without having to regress to it.
Correct.
So yes, and?
Yes.
Is it like, where can Parnell take what's great and good about its past and move into a new season and a new era?
Well, that's where I think we need to go. It's about looking forward and about understanding that we've had all this change, but we've got these great consistent businesses that have been there, like you interviewed Sally, nearly 50 years.
That's amazing.
There's a lot of businesses that have been in the area for 20, 30 years, but I think we do need to grow. I think we need to embrace, we're right on the edge of the city, and there's all sorts of pressures in terms of densification, which in an area like Parnell needs to happen, but it needs to happen really sensitively so that we don't lose our identity in the process. But I also think it's important to make room for some young professionals to put their mark on the suburb.
It's a tension, isn't it?
It's a tension.
And maybe we could see
it's a good tension,
as a healthy tension.
Yep.
Because it's the tension of how do we keep growing and stay alive.
Correct.
And also honour what has been, or the best of what has been.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about your role in Parnell?
I've really loved the role. I think two things. For me, it was a great privilege really to be introduced to a country and have a role that forced me to meet people and open doors. I mean, that was to me a huge privilege. I had been in Australia for a few years, and it really revealed to me how hard it can be and how lonely it can be to kind of start a business. And the other thing I've loved about my role is how varied it is. So you dip your hands into all sorts of different areas. I mean, we have all the advocacy on behalf of our businesses to council. We have the marketing, the networking, and then working on kind of long-term strategic things like streetscapes and things like that. So it's very varied. And every single year, the challenges have been different. So I always say I learn something new every year. And last year was an absolute case in point with the flood damage that we had. I learned a lot more last year about drains and catch pits, which is very unglamorous, but very important for our businesses.
Yeah. I can even hear in your role that there's a certain whittle, a certain challenge that you're putting out either to councils or to the public or to the business owners themselves.
Correct.
To really, keep going.
Absolutely, and to also have some vision for the future, and one of the ladies you interviewed did touch on it in the sense that it's quite difficult to manage a multi-stakeholder landowner environment because everybody thinks differently, everybody has different aims and ambitions for their own properties, and I think there's really a need for some of that to come together into some kind of cohesive vision for the area.
What do you think that would bring if you can get all those landowners into the room and I guess start to foster a real shared vision for the area? What advantage would that be?
I think potentially with tenants more than anything else. I suppose really I'm speaking to my shopping centre background where you would curate a tenant mix. And when you have a village area, you don't do that. And we are quite lacking in certain things. For instance, we've never had a supermarket. Oh, yeah. We have no core convenience in Parnell. We have beautiful discretionary retail. We have beautiful galleries and jewelry stores, but we don't have some of the absolute essentials. And that would probably need a shared vision to realise something like that.
So there's room for additions and room for collaboration. Can you tell me personally some of the things that you love about this suburb?
Well, what I've also loved, because, we do spend a lot of time speaking about Parnell Road, which is obviously the area, that kind of intense part of the village. But if you look at how the bottom area of Parnell has developed over the last years, where the space that we're sitting in today, where all the warehouses have developed and where a lot of the ad agencies have moved, those things really excite me, because we all talk about the beautiful walks and things like that. But as the GM of the Business Association, I love finding those undiscovered businesses. I couldn't believe it that Rocket Lag actually started just next door to this building.
Amazing.
In the most inconspicuous building. And there today, they've renovated that building, and we've got all these incubators in Parnell. We've got the Ice House, we've got the Callahan Foundation, we've got Outset Ventures, and the things that they are involved in, anything from, aeronautics in space, robotics, deep tech, environmental stuff. I find that really exciting.
So what you're saying is it's not just the food, it's not just the shopping, it's not just the art and culture, it's innovation, it's
a precinct,
entrepreneurship.
Yep. An innovation hub almost. Yep.
Very cool.
Yep.
And what would you like to see the Parnell of the future? Like what's your vision?
I think it's a vision to take Parnell into the future and retain what we have. But it's not about looking back and recreating what we have. It's about looking forward and taking the very best of what we have and growing with that.
So what will we need to be able to do that for Parnell? Like what sort of energy or what sort of attitudes will be needed, do you think?
I think we need an energy that is forward thinking and not backward thinking. One of the things I've been really amazed about in Parnell is how loyal people are to Parnell. They are fiercely loyal, which is a fabulous thing. But sometimes I think there needs to be that collaboration of it can change, it can morph, it can change and still retain the best of what it is.
Well, I guess Sally and her gallery is case in point, and for people who've been here, they've seen the evolution of the suburb, and things go in cycles. So it feels to me like this is a kind of an upward cycle. There is an energy in Parnell at the moment. We were saying, walking down the street, hardly any vacancy signs in comparison to other retail areas that are under pressure right now. But using the energy of a cycle in terms of innovation is a good opportunity.
Correct. And our vacancy rate, both commercial and retail, is actually pretty fabulous. I mean, retail vacancy rate is pretty good, and our commercial vacancy rate in prime property is tiny, tiny, tiny. People love working in Parnell. They find it close to the city. They find it easy to get to and from Newmarket, and they love working here. They like going to the cafes. They like the sort of walks at lunchtime. A lot of people say, they love being able to go to the rose gardens at lunchtime. So we're not battling on that level, and I think that's a great testament to the area.
And as a GM of the Parnell Business Association, as a woman, how has that been received? Have you noticed anything positive or otherwise working in this space?
I thought about that question, when I was preparing for this, and I must be honest, I have never felt that there was any barrier to women working in Parnell. There are a lot of business owners that are women, but I've never felt it was a thing to be a woman owner in Parnell or a male owner in Parnell. I've always just felt that there was space for creativity, beautiful businesses that kind of portray lovely design, lovely decor. And to me, there was never a distinction. And I would hope that the women feel the same who own those businesses, because I certainly, coming to New Zealand from probably a little bit more patriarchal society, I found the space really easy. I've always felt that there was no barrier to women growing in Parnell.
That's so wonderful. And I think the other conversations we've had are testament to that. It feels to me like this is not only a safe, but also a welcoming and supportive space to do business.
It is. And as I said, people are fiercely loyal. So they're fiercely loyal to their businesses, but then they also support other businesses. And whenever a new business opens in Parnell, I always say, look after the locals first. Look after the locals first, because if you don't crack that, you won't crack it. It's that double-edged sword of how staunchly they like to support Parnell. We also have, in terms of the residential area of Parnell, people stay in the area for decades. They often sell a large home and would go kind of off, becoming empty nested and go to a smaller home. Their children buy homes in the area. So there's a lot of families in this area that have 2 to 3 generations living very close proximity to one another.
And that's that sense of legacy again.
Yes,
hey?
Absolutely.
Cheryl Adamson, congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done.